Ready to go. Thank you very much. Just for your information, I guess for GDPR purposes and so on, this film is going out. This lecture is going out live on the YouTube. So if you stand in front of the camera, you will be showing yourself to the world. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Ibon Cancio. Close enough. Ibon tells me that the translation of his Christian name is lake. And he also is very much at pains to tell me in his native tongue, which is Basque, that actually he's not Spanish, he's Basque. So I think you're probably the first Basque national speaker that we've probably ever had here. I don't know. I mean, maybe...
I want to speak in Basque.
Anyway, Ibon has come all the way here. Fortunately, his travel route brought him through Frankfurt yesterday and not France, otherwise he wouldn't be here, I'm guessing. Okay, so Ibon is Associate Professor in the Department of Zoology and Animal Cell Biology in the University of the Basque Country. Which town is that in? In Many. It's a distributed one, is it?
Like the University of Wales.
Unlike the University of the Highlands and Islands. Excellent. Okay, great. So he began his studies and gained his PhD there, but he has spent quite a bit of time here in Bangor and in Aberystwyth and anywhere else in Britain? Those two places, I guess. Anyway, he's got a very wide and eclectic range of interests on biomarkers, transcriptomics, histology, endocrine disruption, sex differentiation in fish, I think is a very important sort of interest of his. And so he's looking at the cell and molecular biology of fish sex differentiation and applications of cell biology and toxicology. So that's quite a mixture, Ibon. However, he's not going to talk about any of those things this afternoon. He's been a very prolific writer of articles and book chapters and so on, and has had many students who I'm sure... I met Ibon for the first time yesterday evening, and I'm sure just from that short time that I've known you, I'm sure being one of your students would be a lot of fun. Yeah, okay. And I look forward to continuing some of our chats this evening when we go out. So he spent a lot of time in all sorts of different places. The Natural History Museum in Copenhagen, all sorts of places where he's given talks or spent research time and with collaborators. Anyway, the one thing that we are very keen to hear is, and the reason we invited him here is that Ibon is in the process, I don't know how far along it is, but is in the process of writing a coffee table book on the history of marine stations. And your reputation as an engaging speaker goes before you, Ibon. And so we look forward to hearing what you have to say about this topic here, Scientia, potentia est. And marine biology is the proof. Ibon.
Thanks, Nick. So thanks, Nick, for the introduction. It's a long introduction for such a small guy. I just want to thank the organizers for bringing me here, and I'm going to do that through telling you that you are very sexy. You are very sexy here. And this is about showing how marine biologists are sexy and how this institution here has been working for more than 100 years doing sexy things. And it's very important that we show the population that we are that sexy, because it's the population that through paying their taxes, they are doing our job viable. So Scientia potentia est, knowledge is power. I'm going to show you that knowledge is power. We are sexy and powerful in marine biological stations. So now, how many of you here in this room, you are scientists? Raise your hands. How many of you are scientists? And you have a complex. You think that you are Prometheus. You are stealing the laws of nature from the gods. And you are giving these laws of nature to the citizen. And you are empowering the citizen through giving these laws of nature. But in doing that, we are suffering from an eternal need for funding. Yes, we are always asking for money. We say in our country, like priests, we are always asking for money. And I must confess, I'm not different. I also ask for money. I am a researcher, and this is the car that I want to sell. This is my marine biological station, the marine biological station of Plentzia, belonging to the University of the Basque Country. And it's a very young one. It's not like you, that you were here in 1884, not here really, close to Edinburgh in 1884. We were born in 2012. We are only 6 years old, and we are already part of EMBRC, a big research infrastructure to which SAMS already belongs. We are part of the Spanish node of EMBRC. And I do not know what you know, but now we have to strive towards our sustainability. I do not know whether it happens in the UK, but in the European Union, this is a new sexy word, sustainability of research infrastructures. And sustainability of research infrastructures is like teenage sex, I have learned. Everyone talks about it. Nobody knows how to do it, but everyone thinks everyone else is doing it. So everyone claims that they are also doing it. So in EMBRC, in working towards our sustainability, we did apply for an H2020 project that is called Assemble Plus. And SAMS is working in Assemble Plus. And in Assemble Plus, we had to work a little bit towards studying the sustainability of marine research infrastructures. By the way, I am Thor. Okay, so we thought in a very peculiar way, how are we going to look to our sustainability? If SAMS and previous organizations that give rise to SAMS were already here in 1884, let's study our past. Through studying our past, we will learn lessons that we could use to show that we are sustainable and that we are worth existing. So, European marine biological stations. I'm going to put you in 1910, and the United States of America, the Department of Interior of the United States of America sends a spy to Europe. He's spying the marine biological stations in Europe because they are thinking of making a big research infrastructure close to San Diego. And you all know that that research infrastructure is the Scripps Oceanographic Institute. And COFOIT comes to Europe and visits our marine biological stations during 2 years, spying for the United States of America. And in that map, you have the situation in Europe and the marine biological stations that were already working then. You see in red the ones that unluckily have been closed due to different situations happening during these years. But many of them, they are still open. They are still open and they are working fine. So they must be doing something really sexy. Not only that, UNESCO did a census of the marine biological stations in the year 2017, and there are supposed to be 784 marine stations in 98 countries. So, bloody hell, we are good, yeah? For you to know, one of the marine biological stations was opened in Trieste in 1875. At the time, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in 1876, a young psychologist, a young medical student, Sigmund Freud, did his first research studies in Trieste, working with the gonads of the European eel. He was trying to find the testes in the European eel. And it was not till last century, in the 60s, that a Danish researcher working in the Danish Marine Station discovered that European eels need to migrate all the way to the Sargassos to develop their testes and the ovary. So he got depressed and he changed to psychoanalyze. So the idea now is let's psychoanalyze ourselves. So, this is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the point 27, is not the first one, but it says, right to share scientific advancement. Science gives us power. It gives power to citizens. So it's important. Scientists, you are sexy people. You give power to the population. And when it goes to power, you see, the sea was a void. And we were going to the sea at the first for the good of the empire. Even the Basques were doing it for the empire. And you have Juan Sebastián Elcano, a Basque from a town next to mine. And 500 years ago, he settled for circumnavigating the planet. And he was the first person that circumnavigated the planet. And that was a Basque with Basque technology, because now Victoria was built in Zarauz. And the second one was also a Basque sailor, Juan de Urdaneta. And we were doing this for the empire. And you also did the same. You had people circumnavigating the planet and going to new places for the good of the empire. And the same the French did. And when you go and see things outside your island, you find things. And when you find things, you need to order them. And taxonomy was something that it was initiated in the 18th century. And there is a need to order this taxonomy. You find new things in new places, and you need to establish relationships between organisms. The big natural history museums were open in the 18th century, and when you are putting the organisms in the museums, you need to put them in some kind of order. And you realize that when you go to any place, you have many invertebrates. So really the ark, it's not made by a couple of vertebrate species. In the ark, there are many invertebrates. And just thinking about animals. And when you are thinking about animals, where are most of the invertebrates? Most of the invertebrates are in the coastal areas, in the seaside. So if you really want to study biodiversity, you need to go to the seaside. And that's when the first marine biological station was opened, 1843, Laboratoire des Dunes. It was opened in Ostend. Pierre-Joseph van Veneden, father of Edward van Veneden, who described meiosis. He opened the first marine biological station in Ostende. It was closed later. But it can be considered the initiation of BLIS, the Flemish Institute for Marine Research. The oldest marine station open, that has always been open continuously, is the one of Concarneau in Brittany, that was opened in 1859. And what they were doing was place-based research, which nowadays is not a very sexy thing to say about research. Place-based research was going to the coastal areas and describing what it was living in the coastal areas. And different marine biological stations began to produce publications to show this biodiversity in these coastal areas. And I have shown you an example that is from the Stazione Zoologica Napoli. Another thing that happened, and it happened very linked to your institution, is the Challenger expedition. And with the Challenger expedition, something very important happened. After so many years sailing, 4,700 samples of marine organisms came to Edinburgh. And these organisms were not kept in a museum. They were studied by scientists all around the world. Many of them were coming to number 32 of Queen Street in Edinburgh, and they were analyzing these organisms to write monographies on different groups. And you had scientists from Norway. Sars came here to work on a group. Haeckel came to study radiolaria. Von Kolliker came from Würzburg here. Haeckel came from Jena here to study radiolaria. Those were the taxon authorities. So with marine biology, the internalization of research and transnational research collaboration we can say that it was initiated. And you know that nowadays you cannot work in isolation. You work transnationally through collaborations. And that was something that it was initiated very possibly by the Challenger expedition and the Challenger office in Edinburgh. Not only that, I do not know whether you know that when Challenger was coming back in Montevideo, they met another expedition, a German expedition, the Gazelle, which was doing a little bit the same. It was a dredging expedition. And they arranged in Montevideo that in coming back to Europe, they were doing 2 different transects through the Atlantic Ocean to take different measurements. So it was a German expedition and a British expedition, and it was the first common expedition of the sea. It was the first common research endeavor that we can consider in Europe. And marine stations, normally, in Europe, they open together with aquaria. They open with museums and linked to international exhibition centers. So for instance, you have there the Marine Station of Rovinj in now Croatia. The Marine Station of Rovinj in Marine Croatia, it's amazing. It was opened as an Austro-Hungarian research station. Then it was German. Then it was Italo-Germanic with an Italian director and a German director. Then it became Yugoslavian. And finally, it became Croatian. And it's still open. If that's not a lesson of endurance, tell me what's a lesson of endurance. And the Marine Station of Rovinj was a marine station created to provide marine biological resources for the museum in Berlin. But there were marine biological stations with aquaria on site. And these were, for many people in the commons, among the common citizens, the first opportunity of visiting marine biological resources close to their natural habitats and understand about what was happening. And if you consider about what happened in literature, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, if you read it, it's a taxonomic book. And it was published in 1873, together with the opening of many marine biological stations. Arcasson was opened in 1863. And where was Jules Verne from? He was from Nantes, close to Arcasson. And you do something similar. In 1884, there is an stubborn man called John Murray that he asked for money to found the first Scottish marine station, and he obtained some money, leftovers, of the International Fisheries Exhibition in Edinburgh in 1882, and the Meteorological Society gives that money to John Murray, who is able to raise money also from friends, among them Queen Victoria. And what they do is they put a boat in a quarry in Granton, close to Edinburgh, and this is the first marine biological station in the UK. It stays there for 1 year, and then it's moved to Millport, where it stays until 1900, 1900. I don't know how to say numbers in English properly. And in Millport, they have already a marine biological station. You know, things develop. In the end, this became SAMS when it moved to Oban. Something that you may not know about public engagement is this. The Ark was open for visits. It was open for visits Wednesdays and Sundays excepted at a price of 1 penny. So these outreach activities were already in place in the 19th century. And this was a good opportunity for the common public to come and see what researchers are doing and what the marine environment has to offer us. So I think that marine biological stations are very much linked with the birth of a common social awareness on environmental issues. And this continued with Jacques Cousteau, and then with the Blue Planet thing, but it's something that it was ignited from marine biological stations with public aquaria and with things like that. Provision of marine specimens for universities. So Stazione Zoologica Napoli made a business of providing marine biological stations. And they even had a catalog to provide marine biological specimens to universities and to museums in the 19th century. And I'm going to show you an example. I do not know whether Santiago Ramon y Cajal rings a bell for you. Santiago Ramon y Cajal, it's a Nobel Prize winner, and a Spanish Nobel Prize winner. There are not many. He won the Nobel Prize in 1908, and he expanded the cell theory into the nervous tissue. He obtained the Nobel Prize with Camillo Golgi. And he was working on he did work on a monograph on the central nervous system of cephalopods that it was published in 1917. And he acknowledges that he has received all the samples that he has studied from 2 marine biological stations. Those are the oldest marine biological stations in Spain, the one of Santander and the one of Mallorca. So this is an important thing that we have done along history, provide marine biological stations for research. And we still do it. We have biobanks, we have culture collections, and we provide marine biological resources for research all over the place. And we are in a place where this is done. Another thing, in the UK, you did invent many things. And among the things that you invented, it was tourism. And tourism was very much linked to the development of the railway system. With the development of the railway system, the people in the cities could go on the weekend to the seaside. And when they went to the seaside, they were collecting shells in the sea. And it was said by the time that the common actinia or the snails or the mussels were a house pet. The people used to go to the seaside. And if you go to the seaside and you collect organisms in the coastal area, you need to know about them. So there was a public awareness about this. And I show you an image that I love. You may know St. Andrews there. It's East Sands. And what you see there is the Mackintosh family. It's William Mackintosh and Roberta Mackintosh. And Roberta Mackintosh was the one who was doing the illustrations for William Mackintosh. You know who William Mackintosh was, no? Do you know who William Mackintosh was? The first director of the Gatty Marine Laboratory, placed in East Sands. Okay. So, if the people go to the seaside, there is a need to teach them natural history. And here you have probably who is the one who is considered the father of zoology in the United States. He emigrated from Switzerland to the United States, and he worked in Harvard, Louis Agassiz, and he said something that it became famous. Study nature, not books. The idea was that school teachers had to go to the nature to be able to teach in the schools about natural history. And that was the main reason to opening the marine biological stations that were opened in the late 19th century in the east coast of the United States of America. At the same time, something happened in Europe. There were no science studies. Most of the biologists were formed as medical students, and some of them were interested in natural history. And you know Thomas Huxley, the bulldog of Darwin, and he said that laboratory needed to be placed in the center of university studies. And this completely changed the way in which we teach sciences in universities. We put the laboratory in the center. It's through research. And if biodiversity is in the coastal areas, you need to put the laboratory in the coastal area. that was applied to open marine biological stations. If you think about the process of awarding PhDs, it was very much initiated through this kind of spirit. And it was very much linked to marine biological stations. As you know, Huxley was president of a marine biological station. So, in the United States, the marine biological stations were begun as summer schools, like the Pennikis and the Aniscamp, or the Pacific Group training courses. Training courses were very much often offered in the British marine biological stations. And here I bring you a syllabus of the 1904 of Port Erin. It was lessons of marine biological for fishermen. And this was done in MBA, and it was done in Millport, it was done in Port Erin. Training courses for professionals. And in the United States, it was training people for becoming teachers. And this was very inclusive with women. You see the first course there? There were many women there. And among them, you have a man who became a Nobel Prize winner, Thomas Hunt Morgan. So now, I do not know what you do in the UK when you see Darwin in the room. In my country, when we see Darwin in the room, we stand up. So please stand up. And then we bow. So Darwin came to change everything. He's the guru. Nothing can be explained in biology outside the theory of evolution. And it was very vehicular in the theory of evolution, probably the study of a marine invertebrate, a cirriped, Mr. Arthrobalanus. You know that cirripedes were considered all of them hermaphrodites, but Mr. Arthrobalanus and other groups of the Ibla and Alcipes, they are not hermaphroditic. Some of them are hermaphroditic with parasitic males, completely males attached to them. And some of them, they are completely gonochoristic, separated sexes. You have females and parasitic males living on the females. You imagine Darwin observing that? You have a group in which all the individuals are hermaphroditic, and you have some species that are in transition from hermaphroditism to gonochorism. That's evolution in front of your eyes. That's eureka in his brain. And it was possibly very vehicular in the evolution theory. And it was very vehicular in the research that it was done in marine biological stations. Because researchers, if they want to study biodiversity by the coastal area, they did expeditions like this. And here you have the expedition of Haeckel and Miclolo Maclay to the Canary Islands, or the expedition of Anthondon and Ernst Haeckel to Helgoland. And you know Helgoland is quite similar to this place. It rains a lot. Yeah? So when you go there and you don't have any infrastructure, you have to take all your gear with you. You don't have any help of any local. You do not know anything about the ecosystems there. So there is no the material for good research. And this man came. He has been called the Statesman of Darwin. The idea was, we have to obtain proofs in favor of the evolution theory. And his idea was, we need to open marine stations all around the planet, like if they were train stations where scientists can go, do their research, and move to the next station. And this was presented like that in 1871 in one of the meetings of the Royal Society. Okay, he did not open marine biological stations all around the planet. He opened one. It's the Stazione Zoologica Napoli. It was opened in 1872. And he opened in Napoli because he was once sampling in Millport and the weather was miserable. And he thought that the weather was better in Napoli. It was a big city, an opportunity to obtain clients through opening an aquarium, a big aquarium. If you go to Napoli, you say to the taxi driver, take me to the aquarium. And they all know the aquarium. And he opened in 1872, and here you have the letter of Darwin. I heartily rejoice at the success of your great Naples undertaking, and I fully believe that you have thus done a great service to science. Darwin Dixit. It must be like that. This became the mecca of marine biology for decades. Who were the promoters and founders of marine biological stations? The promoters and founders were, in most circumstances, very stubborn scientists. John Murray, John Palmer, Henry Lacasse-Toutier, people that wanted to do research by the marine coastal areas. And many of them did it linked to universities. But some of them just put in their money and go in there to do research. In other cases, it was very wealthy people that put the money for the marine biological stations to open. And in some cases, it was philanthropists that were very much engaged in natural history, like Ronald Bonaparte, Albert I of Monaco, or Ferdinand from Bulgaria. In other cases, it was scientific or naturalistic societies, like is the case of MBA. So what is a marine biological station? A marine biological station is an Hotel California. It's a place open by the coastline where the scientists can go in summertime and do research. And the family can have a bath in the beach when you are working in the lab. And marine biological stations were open under very different circumstances. There were some that were mobile, like the barrack that opened Newth in Holland. Some of them were open in castles. Some of them were open in fever houses, like the one that was previous to the Gatti. Some were built-to-purpose buildings, and even one in the White Sea was open in a monastery. I'm going to put you an example. This is Alfred Giard, who was in Roscoff working with Henry Lacasse-Toutier and opened a marine station in 1873 in Wimmera, linked to the University of Lille. Okay. After a while, Alfred Giard became a very famous scientist, and he was taken by the University of Sorbonne. He was like a Messi, and he was taken by the University of Sorbonne. So he moved from Lille to Paris. And then the marine station of Wimmera was linked to University of Sorbonne. So University of Lille did not have a marine biological station in its place. So what they did, they opened another marine biological station, the marine biological station of Le Portel in 1889, linked to the University of Lille. What happened? The Second World War came, and Wimmera was bombed by the Germans, and Le Portel was bombed by the Allies. They were completely destroyed. There was a need to reopen a marine biological station for the University of Lille. The University of Sorbonne didn't want another marine biological station because they already had Roscoff, Villafranche-sur-Mer, and Banjul-sur-Mer, so they were not interested. But the University of Lille did not have anything. And what happened? It happened something very nice, transregional cooperation. It was Belgium and France that cooperatively worked towards opening again the marine biological station of Wimmera. And the marine biological station of Wimmera is now open since 1960. Transregional collaboration. That's important. What happened in Stazione Zoologica Napoli? In Stazione Zoologica Napoli, they had a table access mechanism. So different governments, universities, associations, they were renting a working space for 1 year. And for instance, the government of Bavaria could be sending 1, 2, 3 researchers to work in Naples due to this renting of the table. And in the year 1910, there were 50 of these tables. And here you have 2 of the people that used this table. They used the table of Bavaria and visited Stazione Zoologica Napoli. 2 of my heroes there were two good friends, Otto and Otto. And going from Würzburg to Naples, Otto Meyerhoff discovered why I have stitches whenever I play football, lactic acid. And Otto Warburg discovered the respiratory enzyme after fertilization working in sea urchins. And he found that working with sea urchins in Stazione Zoologica Napoli. And he obtained the Nobel Prize in 1931 for that work. And Otto Meyerhoff obtained his Nobel Prize in 1922. So you probably do not know, but working with marine organisms, there is rocket science that is important enough to be awarded the Nobel Prize. Okay, here you have Henri Lacasse-Douthiers. There are sometimes problems between nations. For instance, there is one thing that is called Brexit. I do not know what it is. So, Henri Lacasse-Douthiers, he opened the marine station of Roscoff and the one on Banjul-sur-Mer. And he was a very powerful scientist. You know in France how this works. There are 3-star professors, and he was one of these 3-star professors. Very powerful and very nationalistic. And Anton Dorn, although he opened the Marine Biological Station in Naples, he was Prussian. And I do not know whether you know, but there was a small war between Prussia and France. And Prussia won, and they conquered Paris. In which year? 1871. When was Stazione Zoologica open? In 1872. When was the marine station of Roscoff open? In 1872. So, Henri Lacasse-Douthiers, he didn't want any French scientist to go to Naples because it was working with a Prussian. And here you have examples of how many people from different countries visited Stazione Zoologica Napoli from 1872 to 1910. And you see Germany sent 630 researchers. Italy sent 481. England sent 153 researchers. How many were sent by France? 4. Even Spain sent more scientists with less scientific tradition than France. So politics sometimes are very important. And in marine biological stations, at that time, politics were very important because the branching of biology happened. The new fields were being born, zoology, botany, physiology, and it was very important that these modern branches had a position in peripheral universities. So physiology at the moment, it was the molecular biology of the time. It was the sexy science of the moment. And it was very important for the peripheral universities in France to be able to obtain a professor in physiology, a professor in embryology, and that's possibly the reason why in France, by 1910, there were so many marine biological stations. Marine biological stations have also been very important in empowering women. And here you have some characters. I do not know if you know, but possibly the most successful marine biological station, together with Stazione Zoologica Napoli, is one in Massachusetts. It's called Woods Hole Marine Lab. Yeah? Okay, the Woods Hole Marine Biology Lab was built in Woods Hole through lands that were built or were bought by an operetta that was organized by the Women's Association for Education of Boston. They did this operetta, and with the money that it was raised, they bought the land in which Woods Hole is opened. And here you had this lack of having Seina Marshall, who was deputy director in Millport. Joan Ruderman was president of Woods Hole Marine Biological Station. Sophia possibly was the second woman to obtain a PhD in Europe, possibly the first woman to obtain a PhD in zoology in Europe. And between the years 1878 and 1888, she was director of the Marine Biological Station of Sevastopol. We are talking about the 19th century, and you have a woman that was director of one of the oldest marine biological stations in Europe. Nettie Stevens described the sexual chromosomes. It described why I am XY and you are XX. And it was working in Stazione Zoologica Napoli through 2 accesses. And these accesses were provided by the Naples Table Association for promoting scientific research by women. Every year, from the year 1897 to the year 1935, there were women sent to Naples, to tables in Naples, to do research due to the fact that there were women. You are talking about 1897. That's quite avant-garde. So, which is the result of Kofoid? It says, in our civilization, a new type of station is now in the process of evolution. One, moreover, which is no longer merely a biological station, but rather a station equipped for the solution of biological problems with the aid of all pertinent sciences. So that's marine biological stations. We are there to solve the problems of biology. And which are the problems of biology? We have a trinity. This is our trinity: the evolution theory, the heredity theory, and the cell theory. We are here for that. And marine biological stations have been central to develop evolution theory, to develop what we know in genetics, what we know in cell biology. For instance, Stazione Zoologica Napoli was catalytic to develop what is histology nowadays. Because Anton Don was very good friend with Zeiss. He was very good friend with Jung, and he was very good friend with Abbe. All the first Zeiss microscopes were first tested in Stazione Zoologica Napoli. All the staining techniques that you use in your labs there, hematoxylin, eosin, they were developed in Stazione Zoologica Napoli. Everything we know about embryology, fertilization research, was done working in marine biological stations with marine organisms. We know that the children do not come from Paris due to research in marine biological stations. And vehicular in that was a marine biological researcher, Afro-American marine biological researcher, Ernest Just. He was working for 15 years, every summer in Woods Hole. And he was not treated well due to his skin color. So he decided that it was better to work in Europe. And every summer afterwards, he would come to Europe to work either in Germany or in marine biological stations. He came 7 times to Stazione Zoologica Napoli. And in the last 3 times, he came to Roscoff. And in his last visit, he was working in the lab when the German army came in and he was made prisoner. He was lucky enough to be freed and sent to the United States, where he died. But all we know about the slow and fast block of polyaspermy, we owe to this man, working with marine biological organisms. The rediscovery of Mendel. So if you know Thomas Hunt Morgan, Thomas Hunt Morgan, if I tell you a model organism in biomedicine, the fruit fly. Who is the man of the fruit fly? Thomas Hunt Morgan. Thomas Hunt Morgan was a marine biologist. During his life, he was working with more than 15 different model organisms. And one of the most important was the sea urchin. And the chromosomal theory of heredity we owe to people like Boveri, who visited Stazione Zoologica Napoli 8 times, and to Thomas Hunt Morgan, associated to MBL, and who visited Stazione Zoologica Napoli 4 times. We owe that to this man. And they were working with model organisms, but not only with the fruit fly. They were working with ctenophores. They were working with sea urchins. They were working with marine model organisms. Marine model organisms. We are sexy. And here you have people that have been working with marine model organisms. And this has been very important in neurophysiology. I know how I can move my fingers through action potentials through the study that was done in the giant taxon of the squid. And the giant taxon of the squid was described in between Boots Hole, in between MBA in Plymouth, and Stazione Zoologica in Naples. And these people you have there, they obtained the Nobel Prize for discovering the action potential in the giant taxon of the squid through work that they did in MBA in Plymouth. And Bernard Katz described synaptic communication in the giant axon of the squid working in Stazione Zoologica Napoli. A lot of what we know about memory, we know about working with the sea hare, a marine gastropod. And what about the beginning of the molecular understanding of cancer, the discovery of cyclins? Cyclins were discovered in a marine model organism, in a sea urchin, and in a mollusk, in a Spicula solidissima. And they were described by Tim Hunt, who was working in Cambridge. And from 85 to, for some years, he was visiting every summer Boots Hole, because in Boots Hole, he obtained the marine model organisms to do research. And he described cyclins. What's the molecular biology of cancer without the cyclins? And the cyclins, you know that they are destroyed every cycle. And for that, we need ubiquitin. And who described ubiquitin? It was Abraham Hershko, who was working in Haifa, but in summertime, he would go to Boots Hole to work with marine model organisms. And it was in marine model organisms that he described ubiquitin, and that's the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in the year 2004. And 50 Nobel Prize winners have been working in Boots Hole. Does the people know that? 12 Nobel Prize winners have been working in MBA. 20 in Stazione Zoologica Napoli, including a peace Nobel Prize winner, Fridtjof Nansen. So we are really sexy. In marine biological stations, we do useful science, but we do rocket science too.
Prominent families often forget a simple truth. I've found.
And which truth is that?
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
Seize him. Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go. Step back 3 paces. Turn around. Close your eyes. Power is power.
No, power is not power. Knowledge is power. And we have the power because we have the knowledge. And I'm going to show you who is powerful. The Pope is powerful. The kings are powerful. And which is the color linked to power? The color linked to power is purple. Tyrian purple, cardinal purple. And cardinal purple was obtained for gastropods. And it was very expensive to obtain. That's marine biotechnology in the Roman Empire. It was very expensive to obtain. And it was labeling the power. And it's also the color of the house of the Lannisters. So we are powerful. We are producing through marine biotechnology bioproducts that are powerful. Other bioproducts. I come from a country that we eat anything that swims. Fisheries are very important. And you know, with fisheries research, what it happened? It happened that you develop the train, and when you develop the train, everything got fucked. With the train, you were able to arrive to the seaside, collect fish, and bring it to the city, and the common citizen began to eat fish because it was cheap, and then the stocks got depleted. And when the stocks got depleted, we needed to study fisheries. And you know, because I don't believe in God, but I believe in God. So the utilization of marine bioresources requires transnational scientific activities. And it was like that the beginning of fisheries research initiates with the opening of ICES in 1902, a moment in history in which suddenly marine biological stations saw money. So you say, show me the money. It was the moment in history in 1902 in which we were doing practical science. we were doing fisheries research because that was giving money. And it was the first moment in which the national research councils were born and the governments were giving money for research to marine stations. That was very good for many marine biological stations. They grew, they were able to contract people. It was not good for all the marine biological stations because an MBA, it was a little bit of a crisis. But the marine biological stations in the UK were open, very much linked to fisheries research. That happened with the Gutty, that happened with the ARC, that happened with MBA. Very much linked to fisheries research and very much linked to fisheries exhibitions. In your case, the International Fisheries Exhibition in Edinburgh, and MBA, the International Fisheries Exhibition in London in 1883. This was the moment in which we saw the money. But we were not doing the classical fisheries research that we could consider now that has completely failed, the mathematical, economical research on fisheries. At the very beginning, in marine biological station, what it was important was to study food webs and ecological research. And Kiel in Germany was possibly very vehicular in that. So here you have the man who coined the term biocenosis, and very much possibly the birth of ecological research was very much linked to marine research in biological stations. Not only that, aquaculture research was very much linked to marine biological stations because it was observed as a possibility to obtain fry that you can set free to restock the dwindling stocks. And in Scotland, that's very clear. In Scotland, there were marine biological stations that were fish hatcheries for restocking. In any case, aquaculture, flat fish aquaculture, was very much developed in a marine biological station, in Port Erin. And you know that Port Erin, sadly, was closed in 25. So, we are powerful, but sometimes there are more powerful people. I'm going to tell you a tale that I love. This is the marine biological station in Solovetsky. It was a monastery in the White Sea. So the Archimandrite of the area was very interested in incorporating scientists there because they could increase the aquaculture production in the region. So for 10 years, the Marine Biological Station of Solovetsky, belonging to the Natural Association of St. Petersburg, was open there. Then the Archimandrite died, and another one came, and he said, I don't want these scientists here because they are not serious people. They don't believe. So it was closed. So the church is very powerful. So they moved, and they moved to Alexandrovsk in Murmansk, now the city of Polyarny. And in Polyarny, they did very good research for years. And there was a moment in history in which they have to change their field of research for fisheries research. Okay, what happened in 1933? In 1933, there was one of these Stalin good ideas. He produced a channel from St. Petersburg to the White Channel. Many people died in the construction. It was finished in 1933. And apparently he needed a place for the submarines to be placed. And Alexandrovsk was a fantastic place. What happened? So there was something in the news. They called the Alexandrovsk Marine Station a wasp nest. The scientists there were doing science for the sake of science. Because science is sexy, we like to do science, and they did science. But they didn't anything for the good of fisheries. Who was the director there? It was German Alexandrovich Kluge, expert in bryozoans. What happened? They were put on trial and they were sent to jail. All the workers in the Marine Biological Station of Polyarny were sent for 3 years in a gulag. So you see German Kluge there. You have heard that I am an associate professor. I want to become a full professor. The problem that I have in my institution is that there are too many full professors, and until one of them dies, I cannot substitute him. So this is my director. And as you see, he's very similar to German Kluge. Oh, so my plan is to send him to a gulag. So, now, how we work? We work similar. This was the moment with fisheries research, and we began to do analysis, plankton, and we became observatories of the environment. And now we continue being observatories. And this is been evolving. These marine observatories now are becoming genomic observatories. We are becoming modernized. But what is the emerging thing? The emerging thing that is coming from the ocean, it's marine biotechnology. And the European Union, I do not know whether I can mention the European Union here. The European Union, for blue growth, has spotted 5 pillars that are important for the development of socioeconomic development of the maritime regions. And 2 of them are very much linked to biology. One of them is marine aquaculture, and the other one is marine biotechnology. Also, the OECD, in the Ocean Economy in 2030, it describes marine biotechnology as important for socioeconomic growth in maritime regions. This is evident. Here you see a Japanese that for 15 years was sampling jellyfish and obtained the green fluorescence protein. That's very good marine biotechnology. Now, all the researchers working with transgenic organisms, they are working with green fluorescence protein. And the people do not know that. That's marine biotechnology. All the bloody good science that molecular biologists are doing in very central places like New York or whatever you want, it's based on transgenic organisms that using a protein coming from the sea, the green fluorescence protein. So, we are powerful people. So who wants to live forever? We have organisms out there that can live for years. The boreal whale can live for 211 years. The Greenlandic shark can live for 411 years. There is a jellyfish that is immortal. When it's mature in its differentiated state, the cells can suffer transdifferentiation and become juvenile polyps again. They become mature, transdifferentiation, polyps again. They are immortal. So we have marine model organisms out there to live forever. And not only that, we have model organisms there to live better. This is Synsagittifera roscofensis. It's a small worm. It was considered a platelmintes, but it's an acella. And it lives through symbiosis with a microalgae, Tetraselmis convoluta. It's a worm that performs photosynthesis with a microalgae. And it has got a small brain, a serotonergic brain, with mechano and photoreceptor cells. If you cut the brain of this organism, in 20 days, it regenerates. I tell my students, please study a little bit. If you burn your brain, we will recover it back again. So that's the power of marine biotechnology. And that's what I'm trying to do. Through the Assemble Plus project, we are working in a coffee table book. And in this coffee table book, we are explaining the history of marine biological stations to show the people that are worthy, the common citizen, and the politicians that are giving us the money, that marine biological stations are sexy. And if we are sexy, you need to pay the bill. So the question is, too blue or not too blue? That's the question. And what is your answer? Too blue. My university is very happy. I don't have to pay for my salary. But here it's a little bit different. So the unit costs are very important in the UK. And what it happened in Portering was the unit costs were very, very high. I have been talking about this with Andy Brandt, because I invited him to a workshop to understand why Portering was closed. And the answer I received is Portering was still sexy. It was still receiving 200 students per year. But what it happened is the staff became old in relation to the biology they were doing. And he would said, that's the answer he gave me, too much molecular biology. And the thing is the marine biological stations that have survived, and you can see along the years, is that whenever there is an opportunity, you seize it and you do the new science. Yeah? So that's one of the things that you have to learn. You have to be plastic. And in marine biological stations, that's one thing that we have, because we are very multidisciplinary and we have this plasticity. Yeah? Another thing will, okay, I don't want to talk about other institutions because there is a camera.
I think you're absolutely right about the plasticity. I was at Newcastle University for a while, and although the Dove Marine Lab is only just down the road from the main department and therefore not really very expensive, it was very difficult to persuade the Vice-Chancellor of Newcastle to keep that lab open, actually. And we did it there through providing some excellent facilities for students, actually. That was, and so playing to the student body. But I think that's one of the reasons why we're still here now, is this plasticity, actually.
But if we talk about there are not so many marine biological stations that have closed. And the examples can be spotted in the UK, Portering. Millport is now in a situation which is complicated. I do not know what happens in Aberdeen. It's not very easy to learn if the marine biological station in Aberdeen is open or not. Is that if you look about history, so for instance, Kiel in Germany, it was closed, but because it was bombed. And when it was bombed, the director was killed together with 8 workers of the marine biological station. That was one reason. Trieste was closed because of the First World War. Fiume was closed because the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared. Yeah? So the French Villafranche-sur-Mer became the Russian Villafranche-sur-Mer when the director was lost in the sea. There was a physiological laboratory close to the border with Belgium, belonging to the Sorbonne University, and this was closed when the director was killed in a visit in Indochina. So there are many different situations that have resulted in the closure of marine biological stations. At the very beginning, many of the marine biological stations were unipersonal and were very much linked to that person. Now we are more solid. If I send my director to the Gulag, we have a deputy director in place.
Interesting what you said about the Kiel laboratory, because the Marine Biological Association in Plymouth was bombed, but among the people that helped put the fire out was the director.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you read the book when it comes out, you will find a chapter of MBA, and that is part of what is told there. By the way, there is also going to be a chapter about SAMS provided by Anushka in the book.
Have you seen the coat, the director's coat in the MBA? It's still in the director's...
I have
seen it. It's in the director's office, and it's covered in holes from the lead from the roof. But anyway, that's another story. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, that's good. Time is getting on. Ibon, that was probably the most energetic Newth lecture that certainly I've seen.
You must understand that when I began on that, I was 1.80 meters
okay.
size now.
And I guess you know the origin of the Newth Lecture. Newth was a former, president of the SMBA in those days, and was a notable physiologist. And I don't really know why he, among all of the former presidents, was chosen to give the name of the lecture, but he was. And you've done both him and the lecture series proud with this really fascinating talk and very energetic. I'm a historian of oceanography and marine science, and I learned a lot, so I'm sure everybody else here did too. We have a small gift for you.
Oh,
Well, two, actually. And there's this one, I'll let you open it, because it is actually historical.
Krubach.
Krubag is a company that was based here and formed by one of our students. And if you take these out...
I know this man over here.
You know that man, yeah. So this is, for those of you who haven't seen this, this is a series of table napkins based around the Challenger and John Murray.
John Murray?
Yep.
And it
so
was the
there are
fish,
some of these,
the fish he described.
some of the species of samples that you referred to.
Oh, la, la. There is a fantastic species that he described. It's an anglerfish. I come from a place where monkfish is codfish. It's the queen species. You need to cook proper codfish in order to get married as a man. Then the second fish is black spot sea bream. Lovely, I love it. And then the third fish is the monkfish. Very tasty. And he described a monkfish in which the female is huge and the male is tiny. And he spends all his life looking for a female. And whenever he finds a female, he takes the female, he bites it, and their tegument, their skin, become fused. Their circulatory system become fused, and he becomes a parasite of the female. Or, on the other hand, he becomes a sexual dependent on the female. So whenever she puts eggs, he puts a sperm. But he's a parasite of the female. And he was described by this man.
Excellent. And a musical gift on, these are all local artists that have written songs and performed songs about the sea. So
Cheers.
So thank you
Thanks
very
a lot.
much, and that was a fascinating time, and thank you very much for making the effort to come. It's great.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
The